What's your I was so broke I had to. Story. I moved back into a second floor apartment without telling the landlady. She lived out of state, and the downstairs people had been renting there for years, so nobody really came to check in. So I moved my stuff in, just told the downstairs people I'm back, and lived there rent free. It only worked because the house was converted to apartments without splitting the power and water meters, so the arrangement was always to split it between tenants. So the downstairs lady just split the bill with me. I lived there and only paid utilities for a couple months, until I paid off a few outstanding debts, and saved up for a deposit on a decent place. I didn't buy food. I'd hang out at the dumpster of a Little Caesars where a couple friends worked. At the end of the day, they'd take the leftovers to the dumpster to pitch. They would get in trouble for giving it to me, so I'd hide inside the dumpster below the edge, and they'd gently drop the boxes to me in case their manager was looking. I lived on leftover pizza for months. I gained about 20 pounds. Let me tell you of my childhood. At one point I lived in a burned out garage. It had a dirt floor, windows without glass, and a doorway without a door. We covered the windows with sheets, and the doorway with a folded fridge box. My sister and I bathed in a cheap kiddie pool my mom found on the side of the road, and patched up with duct tape. She showered by tossing a water hose over a tree branch. She cooked our dinners on an oven rack propped up on cinder blocks. Our toilet was the bushes out back. For 3 weeks one time our only food consisted of eggs and bread, because that was all we could afford. Our clothes came from dollar stores, grocery stores, yard sales, and thrift stores. Walking everywhere because you couldn't afford a car, and when you could afford a car it was always on the verge of breaking down, held together with duct tape, Bondo, and hope. Going to McDonald's was a rare treat. Planning meals around us kids getting our free bucket pizzas from Pizza Hut. Moving each year, and changing school districts, because you couldn't stand to live in the current roach-infested, mold-covered death trap you're currently living in, only to move into something with its own set of problems. Having to postpone, having a birthday cake, not a party, never even thought of parties, because we couldn't afford it, because there just wasn't room in the grocery budget this week for a cake. In college, I ran out of cash. I stayed in my dorm for spring break, worked 40+ hours, while everyone else was on vacation, and ate only potatoes and oatmeal. After the first week of classes I cashed my paycheck. I had just enough to cover all my books with something like $20 left over. So, I bought my books, and went on my merry way. Bank of America, however, wanted its pound of flesh. After buying my books, my checking account balance fell below my monthly average, so the bank charged me a fee. Then, they charged me a fee for my account going negative. In reviewing my bank statement, it even appeared they reordered my transactions from chronological to what would cost me the most in fees. All told, I ended up owing over $100 to BOFA. In the end, I shredded my debit card, cancelled my account, and never forgave the bank. After graduation, I worked for a hedge fund. In 2008, I shorted Bank of America as the bank had a lot of problems, and not so much capital. Never did I feel so good betting against a company. TLDR, I lived off of potatoes and instant oatmeal, and counted every penny. Bank nonetheless charged me a fee for falling below my average monthly checking balance that made my balance go negative. Got revenge years later. When I was 7 to 11ish, my mom used to suggest that we play the let's build a den upstairs and all stay in it all evening, and pretend it's a post-apocalyptic world where there's lava downstairs, and we have to camp out with no electricity and eat cold packaged food because the kitchen is in the downstairs lava area game some evenings. I realized years later that we were all hiding from people who were coming to the house to collect money she owed for bills. If we pretended not to be in, there was nothing they could do. I know it's not that bad and a lot of other people had it much worse. I just remember the way she dealt with it is all. One time when I first moved out, I lost my job and couldn't afford my rent for the month. Still managed to eat thanks to government assistance and the local food bank. My 80-year-old great-grandmother wrote me a check for $600 which allowed me to keep my home. I felt so unbelievably guilty. She's living off of Social Security and her late husband's pension, and still found that stack of cash for me. Years later, when I had the money to spare, I went back to her and gave her a check for $600. I told her I was paying her back for the one time she paid my rent. She looked at me, smiled, tore the check in half, and gave me one of those frail old lady hugs. I broke down crying right then and there, and she cheered me up with cookies. I try to visit her as often as I can now. I want her to feel totally loved before she's gone. I had a period where I had no income for about 6 months. In that time, I ate everything that was in my cupboard, from plain rice, to expired jam on stale bread, to a packet of powdered sauce made into a soup. By the end of it, all I had left was salt, and had unplugged my fridge, because there was nothing in it, and no point paying to keep it on. I once found a soaking wet pair of windbreaker-style sweatpants in an alley. They were covered in dirt, totally soaked, and who knows what else was on them. I needed clothes that badly, so I went home, got a garbage bag, and brought them back to wash them. I still have them. They're good pants. One time in college I was so broke that I walked around the campus parking lot one night looking for change so I could go to Crystal's for a single slider, around $1.00. I guess I looked suspicious walking around the parking lot with a flashlight because a cop pulled up and asked me what I was doing. When I told him, he laughed, then drove me to the restaurant and bought me an entire combo meal. Ever since then I will randomly show up at least twice a year with dinner for the night shift officers. Not really exactly the answer, but this is my story. I grew up with a single mom and 2 sisters. Mom was disabled so could not work, and we lived on welfare in Alberta. The shame of that was very real. I still remember one teacher asking the class out loud, "Who here is on welfare?" This would have been because those wouldn't have had to pay for something or other, like we will now speak up in front of everyone. To this day, I'm 63, I eat like I'm in prison. My arms protectively around my place at the table. I remember going to bed hungry because there was nothing to eat. I mean, I lived in Canada for Christ's sake, and I had to go to bed hungry. I remember vividly around Christmas a stranger coming to our front door with 3 bags of groceries and our excitement over the damn food. I have 5 children and bills sometimes were not paid, but they never went hungry and Christmas was always good for them. They never had to know those feelings. And to this day my main charitable contributions are food banks and the Salvation Army, because these are things that keep other children from knowing those feelings that I hadn't have, and cannot seem to communicate to people in any way that they can understand. I guess I'm rambling, but I'm glad my wife and children have no way to really know those feelings. Not me, but my Lithuanian friend at uni. That girl is out of this world. She worked tirelessly to afford studying here in the UK, £3,000 tuition PA. Back in the day, plus very pricey accommodation, because the UK government assumes you're stinking rich if you go to uni here as a foreigner. Even though she had a nice bit of spare cash in the bank at the end of every month, she put her disposable income straight into her savings. No bars, no meals out, no pretty clothes. I have witnessed her living on a £10.00 budget for a whole month. More than once. We'd regularly try to offer her some cash here and there, because living on rice and butter for extended periods of time is not great for you. She wasn't having any of it. We haven't spoken in a while, but I'm 100% sure that she's well on the way to becoming stinking rich. I was working as a temp, and I was getting ready to leave for a 12-hour midnight shift in a dog food factory. I had less than 1/8 of a tank of gas, and I knew I wouldn't make it there and back. I spent the whole 12 hours worrying about how far I would have to walk home. It was driving me crazy. In the morning, I took my dog food smelling t-shirt off, put it over the gas gauge, so I wouldn't state at it, and started driving. I put my car in neutral rolling down hills, probably didn't do anything, but it felt proactive, and coasted as much as possible. I made it to about 15 kilometers from home when my car died and started walking. At 19, this was the lowest I'd ever felt, but it also became furnace that hardened my resolve to get my life going in a positive direction. Sometimes you need a smack of reality to make you change. During college I was so broke that I lived on crackers for a week. Found enough change to buy a jar of jam to go with the crackers. Took it home, so excited to crack it open. Dropped it on my kitchen floor, shattering the glass into the jam. It was either laugh about it or cry. A guy I knew told me he made $25k the previous summer working on fishing boats in Kodiak. I arrived on Kodiak Island with $80 in my pocket and a few leads. Promptly gave the $80 to the owner of a bunkhouse for 4 nights stay and started stomping the docks. With 1 night left until complete homelessness, I got on a crew for a halibut run, and the skipper let me stay on the boat for a couple days until the season opened. For 2 days I ate the pepperoncini and white bread that was left on the boat, and collected cigarette butts off the ground which I emptied the tobacco out of, and bummed rolling papers to make some cigarettes.